Hello there guys, what is going on? Son of Chelsea back here again for another edition of Let's Talk Chelsea, the show where we take a look at some of the biggest news stories surrounding Chelsea in recent days. And really there's only one topic I want to discuss today in depth, so we're going to get into that. Just want to shout out two pieces of content I made regarding that mental Ajax game, which I hope we've all recovered from by now, because it was absolutely enthralling and exhausting at times. But I've got an article for the Chelsea Echo which goes in depth on it in written form, and then also my rational perspective, which is my video review of the game on the channel. If you haven't seen it yet, go and check it out. So yeah, let's get into it regarding Cass and the transfer ban appeal. The date has finally been set. It's the 20th of November. The appeal against transfer ban will be heard at the Court of Arbitration for Sport. Cass will rule on FIFA's punishment, with the Blues said to have broken rules to sign youth players from abroad. Cass intend to conclude matters before the January transfer window opens, thus allowing Frank Lampard to potentially bolster his squad. So yeah, the date has been set, which is pretty exciting. So we're finally going to get some sort of answers, clarity on what's going on with the appeal and the ban. Of course, Lampard was asked in his pre-match press conference for Ajax, and he sort of said, we're on a good run at the moment, but of course it'd be a positive to have the ban overturned. Now, like a lot of fans, I sort of echo the sentiments of feeling that I don't really want the ban overturned. Now, it's not so much in sort of a militant sort of way of saying, you know, I would, if it's the end of the world if this ban gets overturned. Really, it's not. If you disconnect yourself from Chelsea, which is of course is hard to do in sort of the situation at the moment, and the feeling of positivity towards the team, from a business sense, it's a good thing to be able to sign and sell players in a January transfer window. I look back to the David Luiz situation as a prime example of this. Even if we don't do business, that happened so quickly, and the club had to deal with it in the final day of the transfer window. And something similar could happen. You never know at the top level of the game, especially at a club like Chelsea, right? So having that ability, and then it always is one of those things to maybe be able to replace a player. And we're going to get into some of that, because I think January, if it is overturned, will be more about players leaving than I think coming in personally, and because it is always so difficult in January to bolster the squad. But in my opinion, the reason I don't really want it overturned is because, number one, I find transfer windows really sort of dull and mind-boggling, and sort of just, it's so tiresome, the level of clickbait and rumours that fans are swept away with, really. And I think, like a lot of us, you just get so tired of it, and sort of the urge and thirst of transfers all the time can get quite frustrating. And personally, for me, watching the team at the moment, I just want to see this squad that we currently have gelling together, working well together. We're seeing the signs of progression. We're seeing where this squad could go. A lot of young players coming into the squad, and a lot of the more experienced players and the older players working well as well. I want to see this team get a full season together, and see what happens, and really Frank to be able to embed what he's doing, work with the team, work with his methods, improve the team, the tactics, where he looks to intend to take this team in a couple of years, and see if he can, you know, get the spine of a team together that then can be added to in the summer, where, you know, we're able to sign bigger names, and really improve in areas that Frank can identify by the end of the season. Because you could say there's a lot of areas, right? But I think I'd wait, because things can change very quickly in football. And just when you're in the season, earlier in the season, it's very hard for me to look that far ahead and say, yeah, this player and that player, because some players sign for you that you weren't thinking of 6 months previous, you know, and that's how football works. And, you know, I'm not a scout, you know, I'm not someone who's going to be involved in the transfer business of Chelsea. So it's, personally for me, I'm just really happy with the squad at the moment, and I just want to see what they can do. There's a feeling of just excitement of every week of seeing how this is going to go. It feels like an experiment, and I want to see how Lampard and the chemistry and the togetherness we saw on Tuesday against Ajax, and other games apart from that, I want to see that get a full season. And I that's going to be Lampard's biggest challenge when the ban is overturned and when it ends, which would be the summer, is the fine balance of keeping the squad he's built happy and allowing them still to flourish and develop, especially the younger players like Pulisic, like Tammy, like Mason, Fakayo, Reece James, Ruben when he comes back, Callum Hudson-ODOI, all of these players, but then adding to it with real quality additions to bring strength and depth to the squad, but not disrupt that chemistry and that that unity and bond that's already going. So it is the trouble and the challenge of a manager all the time, because even though we always want maybe signings to come in, sometimes that isn't the best thing for a squad, and it can sometimes disrupt if you make too many changes. And Matt Law for The Telegraph wrote an article about who could be leaving, and in my last Let's Talk Chelsea I discussed Olivier Giroud and the potential of him leaving, his frustrations over game time, and this article pretty much talked about that in depth as well, stating Chelsea could listen to bids for World Cup winners Olivier Giroud and Pedro in January, while Marcus Alonso is facing a fight over his long-term future at Stamford Bridge. Neither Giroud nor Pedro were part of Frank Lampard's squad for the dramatic Champions League Group H draw against Ajax on Tuesday night, while Alonso was replaced at half-time by impressive teenager Reece James. Giroud and Pedro only have just over 6 months remaining on their contracts and can speak to foreign clubs in January over free transfer summer moves. I think all of that is quite obvious, and I think Giroud's the most likely player to leave. You look at it, in my last Let's Talk Chelsea when I discussed his playing time, he hasn't got much since. I think the only game time he's got is coming on when the game was dead at Burnley, and he barely featured. He didn't feature at all against Manchester United in the League Cup. Michy Batshuayi scoring a brilliant solo goal, and Tammy Abraham coming on later when we were chasing the game. He didn't feature at all, of course, against Ajax. And how is he going to get second choice ahead of Batshuayi? That is the difficulty. And even when Tammy's not scoring, I feel like he adds something to the way we're playing. And that's a frustration, I'm sure, for Giroud, because I think the pressing system, the way Lampard works, the pace of the game, I think is so much benefited from Tammy's work, even off the ball. So that's the challenge for Giroud, and his long-term thinking is about Euro 2020. He's playing for the national squad at the moment. We've heard Deschamps' comments about this and his lack of playing time. There is going to be that fear from Giroud if he stays, doesn't leave in January, and continues basically as third choice, barely gets any minutes, gets a few 20 minutes here and there, but isn't at all getting any substantial minutes. Will he drop out of that Euro 2020 squad for France? That naturally is a concern. I think on the case of Pedro, I think he's probably happy with where he is in his career and understands maybe he's coming to the end, and I think probably would happily wait till the summer maybe. So I think he's maybe more relaxed on the situation. He's still getting minutes here and there for Lampard more than Giroud is, and maybe can be a good player to have later on in the season with experience and now seeing run-ins to a season. So I think he's a good player to have around the squad, even if he's not always taking part. And Alonso, that's quite an obvious one. He was taken off against Ajax the other night, and I think a lot of us feel this is his last season. And Ben Chilwell being linked very naturally, and looks like kind of a prime target Chelsea will be going after, like a lot of top clubs. He's doing exceptionally well, like Leicester are at the moment. I'm sure that will be one of Chelsea's many big targets that will be rumoured. But yeah, it's all sort of up in the air whether the ban gets overturned or not. It's to me, I'm sort of quite relaxed about it, really. I'd prefer it not to be, and that we go out and dramatically try and sign a short-term option that I don't think is beneficial. It's funny, now we're playing Crystal Palace and there's a lot of talk about Zaha and us being linked. I think I've said on Twitter, but definitely maybe not on here, that I prefer not signing Zaha for that high fee, because I think we've got better players, or at least players in positions that have longer to go, that are longer term. HUDSON-ODOI and Christian Pulisic. Those are two players for me there that potentially have higher ceilings than Wilfried Zaha. I just don't see the point of spending that amount of money, especially when the argument always gets thrown about Willian, right? But Willian's having a decent season this year for Lampard, and I think he's a good player to have in the squad. So that's a move I wouldn't make. So those are my thoughts and feelings on the appeal, and we're going to have to wait and see till the 20th of this month to see what happens. And if it is overturned, as I say, it gives the club that security of knowing that there is the opportunity, if a player does leave, that they can recruit someone else. I think that is always probably a nice situation for Lampard to be in, and maybe Lampard has eyes already on targets. We don't know that. Of course, there's going to be scouting that's done internally within the club that could mean that there's already a list being made, and maybe Frank already feels that he may want to make signings in the window, and he was quite sort of open about that he does like the option to have the option to strengthen. But as always, we're going to have to wait to see for that conclusion, and we'll talk about it when the decision is made on the 20th of November for sure. But that is it for this edition of Let's Talk Chelsea. Let me know your thoughts on everything we discussed in the comments below. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. If you did enjoy it, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell to never miss an upload. Like for more Chelsea. Follow me on Twitter @SonOfChelsea, and I'll see you again.